Have you ever wondered what it takes to make AI truly transformative in its applications? Is it just about having a lot of data, or is there more to the equation? If that is the question that you also have, in this episode of Extra AI podcast, we are excited to explore these questions with our esteemed guest, Thomas Russell, the CEO of Verodat. Thomas will help us navigate the critical nuances of the data supply chain in the context of AI. We will discuss about how the right data, when used correctly and in the right context, can unlock the full potential of all the AI technology. This episode promises to shed light on the principles of creating an effective data supply chain, the strategies for sourcing high quality data, and the real world impact of these practices. So join us as we uncover some of these things. One, the essentials of data supply chain. What makes a data supply chain effective for AI applications? Second thing, sourcing high quality data. How can we identify and secure the best data for AI? Third thing, contextual data utilization. Why is the context in which data is used crucial for AI success? And obviously, the fourth one, real world applications, examples of AI systems that have thrived due to robust data management. So, whether you are a data scientist, an AI enthusiast, or a business leader looking to leverage AI, this episode is packed with insights and practical advice. Let's dive into the transformative potential of a well orchestrated data supply chain with Thomas Russell on our Extra AI podcast today. As always, you'll find more information at the end of the podcast. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation. All right, welcome back to our Extra AI podcast series on AI and machine learning applications. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Mr. Thomas Russell, CEO of Verodat. And today, the topic is around around the data supply chain. So we talk about the right data, the right way for AI with Verodat. Welcome on board, Thomas.
Hi, Andrew. Thanks a million for having us on a call. Delighted to join you. It's great to be here.
All right. So before we get into the conversation, I would like to get a few things right. I think about your personal story or about your backstory, about how you got into AI and what are the things that propelled you getting here. Maybe a personal story or a professional story, which could help the audience understand your background.
Okay, cool. I think people end up in AI, I think, more so than get to AI, right? So a little bit about me, I guess. I studied physics, applied physics in college, really because I like sciences. I love physics as a base science because it helps you see the patterns of what's happening. So it's not just the kind of engineering flow of what's in front of you, it's like the underlying patterns. So I'm very interested in that area. I do think deeply about things actually, and fundamentally why they work the way they work, and that's a passion of mine. Career-wise, then I started in consulting. I've worked in startups, in the operations, kind of data management roles within those companies, and I founded an advisory firm back in 2012. And the focus of that was in the data space, and it was a journey, right? So we would have come in, worked at an executive level, helped companies figure out how to build data applications, various data services, help them stand up the stack technically, deal with all the issues that you kind of see in that journey. And that was brilliant, right? Because you're now in the cold phase trying to figure out, how do I get stuff done? How do I make things happen? And, you know, when you get into an organization, it's not just technology you're implementing, it's people, it's processes, and you got to understand how all of those interconnect. But one thing that jumped out at us as we kind of were on that journey is definitely in the data world, you have, it's kind of like, we call it a little pyramid, right? But the pyramid is kind of upside down, right? So when you want to go get data and manage data and get it for the customer, you have very little options. There's not very much variety there. But if you go down to the other edge of the pyramid, you have a ton of options on how you might analyze it, get value from it, et cetera, et cetera. So we kind of felt that edge, that pointed edge of the pyramid, that's where we saw an opportunity to do something better, and to make it a bit easier, give better options to customers. And so we focused in on that point effectively. And we've come up with a cool way, I think, to help companies, a cool piece of tech to help companies give them better options around how they get their data, specifically AI ready, right? Because machine learning, AI, it has much different demands to charting. Charting is just graphs and directional in nature, whereas AI and ML is very prescriptive, very instructional. So we see that as an exciting space. So yeah, that's kind of our journey to how we got to Verodat, I guess.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I know with all the innovations happening around with not only AI, but with generative AI, there is a lot of excitement out there. Any such things that are more exciting for you or for your company? Maybe in a few lines, I think if you can explain.
Yeah, so here's my take on it, right? So AI is a brilliant tech, right? And I was trying to feel what a good tech is, by the way. So good tech is tech that's easy to use and saves you time. If a tech isn't passing that criteria, for me, it's not a good tech, right? I need it to save me time, number one, and it needs to be easy to use. But AI, its ability to do that is extraordinary. It's not just good, it's extraordinary in terms of what it can do, because it kind of makes everyone within your spectra able to do stuff and consume technology. So, you know, your granny can use AI quite efficiently actually to do jobs. So it's very, very good as a tech there. But when you start to go into industry and go into business, and that's where we really want to deploy because that's what we consume every day, we have major problems, especially in the analytics space, where companies are really struggling to try and get the data at the right quality to that AI. And that's a supply problem. It's not a small problem. It's really important that we get it right. I think a lot of nervousness around AI from a regulatory perspective is how well that handshake is set up, because you don't have proper controls around the data that you're flowing into your AI. There's a myriad of, I suppose, miscalculations that can be made. And that's where I see it as a key opportunity. It's a big opportunity, I would say, rather than it's a big problem. Because I think if you say it's a big problem, it means it's intractable. It's going to be super difficult to solve this. We don't see it as intractable. We don't see it as super difficult to solve. But I think you've got to look at it in the right way, approach it with a pattern that actually understands what's happening. And if you approach it that way, you can see significant benefits in how you can get AI working.
Beautiful, beautiful. I like the way you have explained. I think using the approaching the right way, and if you can use it the right way, and how you can get the right data in at the right time. I think this is where I think many of the problems can be solved. Let's take a quick break, come back, and then get into our real meat of our today's conversation.
Perfect.
All right, welcome back. So let's now get into the real meat of our topic today, Thomas. So I know you've been working with a lot of these enterprise firms and consumer firms. How do you see, at a very high level, I would want to ask you this question, how do you see AI transforming these different businesses, whether it is coming from the enterprise world or whether it is from the consumer space? I know you've been involved a bit. Before we go into the details of how you guys are doing it, maybe at a high level, 10,000 feet picture about how AI is transforming these and with the context of the data that you are talking about.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, right? The context here is that if we think about what companies have been trying to achieve with data, I think it's been missed actually for a couple of years. But what people and business people, even people who operate in the business, what they're really looking for is an understanding. So trying to understand what's actually happening, understand so they can make good decisions in what they're doing. And what we've been doing for years is actually saying to people, here's a chart that you need to understand your business. So this is kind of a confused story if you think about it. You're asking people to understand in a certain way, you're prescribing how they're going to understand. And I think what we're going to see here is a big shift. from kind of analytics, and even insight is a terrible jargon word. I'm going to give you an insight. That sounds, it's kind of very arbitrary, right? But what people are really looking for is an understanding. And if we can reach towards that, it makes a big difference. Now, what AI enables us is to be able to democratize, in a way, how that understanding is presented. So if you think about it from this perspective, which is to say, I am a learner, I learn in a certain way. I operate in a certain function. I might be a salesperson, so I learn a different way to maybe a technical person, et cetera, et cetera. So how I understand it is completely different. Now, the beauty of AI is it can allow you to get to the same information and get to an understanding that is clear for you, but it's based on the same facts. It's based on the same information. So if you're in sales and I'm in tech and we're trying to understand something that's happening, the AI can orchestrate that it answers the questions I need answered the way I want them answered, but on the same information. And similarly, from a sales perspective, it might actually just interact in the right way. Same as I might do if I'm walking down as a CEO into the technical team. I would communicate with them slightly different than I might communicate with the marketing team or with the sales team. And that's appropriate, right? That's kind of respecting your end user. So I think AI is going to create this new wave of understanding, but an understanding of the facts that underlie what happens, not just an understanding that's kind of in conflict within an organization. And think of the beauty of that when you arrive into your business, that you have this alignment of understanding within your business. I think that's a phenomenal benefit to be able to create.
Beautiful, beautiful. I kind of got what you're saying when you talk about understanding your data, because the understanding comes from different aspects, whether it is coming from an engineering team or a sales team or a marketing team. But at the end of the day, you will have to address and answer these problems. So what are the typical challenges or the typical problems faced by the customers that you deal with, whether it is the enterprise firms or the consumer firms? Any typical challenges that you face?
Well, I suppose let's try and break it into buckets for a second, right? So if you're dealing with a firm that has a deep tech competency, right? So they have an established data operations, very strong data function. They have a lot of kind of in-house knowledge of processes to follow for managing data. That's one group. I'll come back to them at the end, but that's one group of companies, right, who are very deep tech oriented. There is another group who are a huge group of companies, by the way, who are focused on the business process and the consumer delivery of what they're doing, and that's how they generate value. And they are focused on having really good data and trying to do that well, but don't necessarily have access or the day-to-day appetite to put in place the data operations needed to manage it. So when they look at AI, they get confused a little bit. They're kind of going, I've got this consumer experience that's kind of very compelling about how easy it is to use, and I could see how this could work. And then when they go to execute that in their organization, they bump very quickly up with, oh, your data isn't in the condition it needs to be to support this. We got to kick off a strategic data program. Always hated that term because I don't know really what it means, a strategic data program, right? Of course I do, but it's an awful jargon thing to have to do.
Right.
Whereas I think what we're seeing is when we can provide to that executive group a practical, rational, kind of familiar type way to look at the problem in the first place, then the answers don't seem so complicated. That tech team in the corner, or data team in the corner, they don't seem to be doing as much wizardry as before. And I don't mean that in a bad sense. I mean, it actually becomes accessible to them. And I think that's just a matter of refocusing it back into a business problem, refocusing it back and saying, okay, you've got this problem in your business. Let's go fix that. Let's go fix this one. And let's measure our velocity of how quickly we can fix it. And the great news is we can fix it quite quickly, actually, when we follow a certain approach for how we do that. So I think that's super exciting. And I mentioned that deep tech group at the start who have a lot of, I suppose, technical expertise and kind of process, right? And established over a long tenure of time, right? The challenges we sometimes feel or see with those firms is entrenchment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a skepticism or fear about a new way of looking at the problem or a new way of looking at a new pattern for how to solve these things. And, I think for them, I think some of those deep tech was they were at the edge. There's an opportunity that may get missed if they don't look around the corner and say, actually, we need to approach this slightly different now. That all of this money and effort we poured into solving the problem in this way kind of doesn't work very well when you move it into the AI context. And actually, when you move it into the AI context, I remember being at a couple of events more recently in San Francisco where guys had just said, I'm no longer in chatbots. It's no point. I can't compete because of that step change. It's that was the obvious step change, right? But in the data management world, there is an obvious step change happening as well. And there's a ton of efficiencies when you go across and look at the problem slightly different from the lens of AI, then you get this new opportunity open to you. And I think it's mindset shifting when you're in a deep tech saying, hey, look at this slightly different. I know you're in your comfort zone and you can deliver. And then for other enterprises, it's effectively saying to them, this problem is now not as complex as it was. And it is much more executable in a way that you can understand, like you do in other parts of your business. It's no longer a black box. So I think they're the two things that we're seeing. And just to wrap it up, I would see the frustration is there, right? Because when I want something as an executive, and I know it's possible, I can feel it in a consumer level that it's possible. And then when I go to try and do it in my own organization, I get frustrated in trying to do that. That's a very tough position to be in. And you end up in two pools. You either end up despondent about the future in general and say, hey, I'm not sure about this AI story, or you just end up despondent on your own story, which can even be worse, right? But we see that as, I think it's a likely outcome, I would have said, 12 months ago as AI folded around. I would have said this summer was going to be the summer of pain, where companies were going to be faced with this challenge. And if they approach it with the same tools and methodologies they had before, they really won't, they will get stuck. We're seeing a good bit of that. But I would echo out, there's definitely a better way to do this. And we're excited about that from our point of view.
Right. I think beautifully, I think you laid it out very beautifully, saying that there are different camps out there when you talked about the deep tech camp, or whether it is the process-oriented camp, or whether it is the customer experiences camp. The way they understand the problems or the way they face the challenges are a bit different. And how do you address them is going to be a little different. And how do you get the value of data in the context of AI? That brings me to this interesting question. I know you keep talking about, when we talked about outside of this podcast, I think when I first met with you, we talked about the data supply chain. Maybe for our audience, could you give I know you gave the context a bit around that when you are talking about how you understand the data in these different contexts. But the concept about the data supply chain that you're talking about, how it is different from the data pipelines, and why it is important in the current context of AI. Maybe if you can highlight that a bit for our audience, would be helpful.
Okay, cool. So if we look at the data problem, you got to start with who is the data owner, right? And the data owner is the person who owns the system, who creates data in the first place, or is management of that system that collects the data. So your first goal is to be as close to that source as possible. So make sure you're able to have as strong a relationship as possible with that data owner. And strong relationships are relationships where when you work with that other party, you're giving them tasks to do that are easy to do. You don't give them hard work, right? Because it's a golden rule in business. Don't give people hard work because it'll take too long to get it back. You got to give them things they can get done, okay? So staying very close to them is really important. And when you start to do that, that data owner in our context is the supplier of data to that central function of the business that needs the data, is going to build a solution. So that's your supplier, so getting really close to them. And I would say in most of the data management practices that we've seen emerge over the last 15 or 20 years, that has been largely ignored, that relationship with that supply source of data. And if you focus on the collaboration and how that those two parties work, that interface works between the supplier of data and we call them consumers, or how you use that data, that other entity. If you focus on that relationship and make that optimized, you now get this data supply working, right? So I'm kind of telling you a little bit about the mechanics there. And in general, there's a golden rule and principle in business which says, if you're looking to solve a problem, it's most likely at the interface. So go focus on making the interface more efficient, right? So we have a supplier, we have somebody who needs to consume the data, make that interface super efficient. So that's one way of framing it. I'm going to give you a second way as well, because I think the second one is probably a bit more familiar to people, right? So if I work in a manufacturing, a medical device company, let's make it a pretty serious requirement, right? And I'm making orthopedic knees effectively. So I need to order in materials from my suppliers, and I need to get that data, right? So these guys classically have a data supply chain. They have various vendors and service providers that are supplying them all the parts they need. And it's critical that they're within certain tolerances, certain specs, and all that kind of stuff. So what the supply chain team does within that medical device company is say, actually, here's the spec of what I want. Here is the requirements that it needs to fit. I will buy it off you if it fits these requirements and needs, because that's what I need to efficiently create a need, right? This is similar in a data context, right? So in a supply chain and data, I'm going to say, hey, I want to be able to answer this business problem. I want to give this understanding to the organization. And by the way, we now know that's super quick and easy to do because AI makes that easier to actually deliver, right? So I want to get this understanding. And what does that look like? Well, it looks like a data model, okay? Now I'm going to share that with you, supplier of data, in a very deliberate way and say, I need this data to solve this problem. And do you have this data to solve this problem? Do you have it in the standards that I need? And often you got to consolidate it from multiple sources, so there's lots of conversations to make that happen. But when you use a supply chain model, you're explicitly saying, I want this data in this structure, and you're sharing that with all of your stakeholders. And then if you've got the right approach, you can manage that conversation in a very efficient way. And the last point I'll wrap in with what efficient means is you want to always avoid a situation where you're asking open-ended questions on how to solve a problem. And data is the most open-ended thing you can say. I need your consumer data. That means absolutely nothing, or your customer data. I need your name, address. I need the start date. I need the end date. And they might go, well, I have name, I have address, I have start date, but I don't have end date. Now it's much easier to solve that problem, much faster to solve that problem, and it's much more explicit. So there's huge advantages when you reverse the journey and say, hey, I'm building a data supply chain here. I'm going to be very clear about what I want. The whole nature of the collaboration and the conversations shifts dramatically into a very efficient conversation about tasks that can get done rather than open-ended questions that just can't get solved.
Beautiful, beautiful. I think that's very well explained. I think the whole process about how you get the data, I think the concept between the data suppliers and the data consumers. I would like to now head into this context of the question about Verodat itself. I know you briefly talked about the different aspects of what kind of problems you're solving, but we talked about the different problems and you explained about the data supply chain and all. Maybe I think at this point of time, if you can explain what is Verodat, who is it for, what is your mission statement, and what's your vision, and who are your target users? Who is your target market, and how do you go about it?
Yes, more than happy to do that. Okay, so I'm going to start at the outside in here because it's kind of a mission that we're on. I touched on the start. For me, fundamentally, as a tech company, and we are a tech company, we're providing a tech product. Fundamentally, what we build has to be easy to use and save you time, and we measure that. We don't just, it's a complete cultural identity to us in terms of what we do, right? And in the AI space, what we're really trying to do is remove complexity and that need for deep tech expertise just to make this work, right? So we're on a mission to make what we consider a great tech, We believe AI is a great tech for lots of reasons. Even if you take it into your personal life, AI done well will make your life less complex, simpler. You won't have to deal with 10 apps on your phone. You might only have to deal with one. You'll have at your fingertips the information you need when you need it, all that kind of good stuff. And that just takes friction out of it, gives you more time back with your family, all that good stuff, right? So good tech is there, AI is there. And what we're focused on is making sure that that AI is getting really good data and what we call AI-ready data. I don't think I've explained this earlier on, but we've a clear view on what that is. And that is data that has really good context, that has what we call that supply status. And I think if you connect to the supply chain, you'll understand that, which is to know that the data that you're looking at is up to date. Not, if you picked it up as a tin of food, you'd know, hey, it's safe to eat because it's not out of date, right? And then the last point is you can do attribution, that you can prove provenance and where that came from. And when you apply that, and we're in the AI space, we're in that analytics vertical of the AI space. So helping you get an understanding, so analytics, right? And I think that's a fundamental, I suppose, target area for us. In terms of what we want to achieve, then, given that we've got that approach, right, we have this opportunity to work with companies or enterprises across a broad spectrum, right, who have largely got structured data within their organization or the ability to create structured data. So we've insurance clients who process, PDFs into structured format, but we then actually ensure that structured format is ready for AI usage, is standardized, and can be safely consumed downstream with full provenance, so we can tell the story all the ways back. So if you do have an issue, if it's a legal document, you can trace it back. So anytime that situation exists, we're there to kind of support it, right? Yeah. So Raghu, I think what I'll pick up on now is we spoke about that insurance use case, right? And like when we do what we do there, we really open up a myriad of opportunities downstream for those clients across various tools, actually really familiar tools that are easy to deploy. Like the insurance organization and the people who run an insurance organization have familiar tools that they use. You can't really bring in super new tech in there. But AI can be deployed through Excel, through Copilots, through GPTs that are easy to use tech for those guys to be more efficient within their job. So that's kind of one box. But there's always this good example, and I really like this example because it kind of just shows the accessibility of what we can do, right? So we have an electrical contracting company, right? And let's take the CEO in that company. He's not focused on temp, right? He's focused on delivering large projects across the city, across the UK, in various locations, right? So we're just going to give a day in the life for this guy, right? So he's going to drive up to one of his sites. As he arrives in, he's going to get a text on his phone or a message, an email to his phone. In that message will be a report on the status of the project that he's now kind of arriving at, a full overview of what's happening from a profit and loss perspective, who are the key guys, who are the key clients there, and also what staff, who's the foreman, is it his birthday, all the kind of stuff that he might need to know, right? So he's sitting in his car and he clicks on the audio file and he gets a full briefing, including kind of any challenges that need to be addressed on arrival. Now, how is that done, right? And how complicated is that to do? Let's break down the practice, because I think that's the important bit, right? So here's the mechanics of that, right? He has a GL, an accounting package within his business, right? So that gives us accounting information. It's organized around the job numbers for various sites, all that good stuff. He also has information in his business around time tracking. Most companies would, in terms of tracking hours worked by their resources, and kind of HR details around the team that he has, right? There's a little bit of organizing to make sure your job numbers connect all that information together, but this is fairly structured information and most likely being done anyway within the administrative team, maybe on a monthly and quarterly basis. We accelerate that to get that done every day, automate that piece with our data supply chain approach. Now, what we've done is we take that data, we make sure it's correct, we snapshot it every day, so we create a nice history of it. And then we allow AI to sit on top of it. And when AI sits on top of that, we allow it to query it and then to summarize what it's getting back as responses. attribute where it got those responses from so that we can clearly distinguish it. And we can then convert that into an audio file, convert that into the format. And by the way, in the process of how we set this up, that company has lots of jargon, internal buzzwords for how they operate. And because of the nature of the way we can wrap context when we build a data supply chain into the data model, we can, over a very short period of 4 or 5 weeks, tune the data model to be reflective of the culture and the jargon that's used in the business, to make sure that the communication, as we spoke earlier on, that is directed at the CEO is the communication that CEO will understand. That same communication can be communicated to a CFO, but also communicated in the way he will understand, and to the foreman and sliced and diced as needed. So this is what I'm talking about when you stitch it together. This is a net new experience everyone's going to feel. So what is the tech experience for the CEO here? And this is the bit I love, right? It saved him a ton of time, ticks that box out the door, because he actually got the message. And how did he get the message? Because he has time tracking, which has geolocation in it, and it created the event trigger for the AI to go do its job, which you can now do in seconds, compared to an admin in the office having to spend 4 days preparing a pack for a job. This can do it in a matter of moments. And then they're getting it delivered in a format that is their way and the way they need it to understand what's going on, for the way they hold conversations, for the way they're going to engage. So I think that's just a great example, just a great example of practical, done today with today's technology available, obviously using Verodat, but using that AI ecosystem available today. It's not next year's AI capability, it's actually this year's AI capability. And deployment setup of that is maybe it took us 5 weeks to tune it, but customers active within 2 or 3 weeks. So that's our model.
Beautiful. I completely understand now the process, and I think thanks for laying out it with an example as well. So one other follow-up question on that is about how would is Verodat available as a service, or how do you kind of run it? Meaning, are you integrated into the product, or you work as a SaaS service sitting on top of this product and this platform, or what are the different options that you have?
Okay, so we're a SaaS platform. So you can go online, talk to a team, and they'll set you up with a license for the platform. And that platform allows you to define your data model. So define what data you need, define whom you need it from, and ensure, track, and manage the supply of that data. You will build rules, you'll build context around that. We provide loads of support to do that. And we have AI wrapping in all the time to make that easier to do. So that's how you kind of get your, set up your data supply need. And that's what Verodat does. On foot of that, we have a number of what we call add-on capabilities, activation capabilities. They activate you in your very familiar environment of Excel. You can get your data in there. We can activate it by allowing you to integrate it into your applications. So when I say integrate into your applications, you get the opportunity to call that AI-ready information layer, pass it specific instructions to get the data that you need. Within our product, you can define prompts that you want used for certain workflows and manage and maintain those. And that combination then can be deployed onto a model that you might have. Could be an open public one like OpenAI or Anthropic or any of those guys, or it could be a private one which you have set up in your own environment or cloud environment to operate, and we can point to that. So there's lots of versatility then about the model that you want to put in front of it. So that's kind of where we start and finish, right? So we get you active and along that curve. As you go along that curve, then we start to introduce you to what we call AI service providers in the ecosystem. And these are the new AI builders that are out there. I think that's an exciting bunch. We're talking here to a San Francisco audience. These are the guys who are creating really cool models, right, to solve pretty complex problems, but have a data need from a customer in order to operate. We're really excited to get those guys in front of our customers to get their solution operational. And there's a significant advantage for these guys, right? Because when you use Verodat to agree that handshake or that collaboration that you want with your customer, you're guaranteeing that the data that goes into your model is of a set quality and set structure, which means your model holds stable, it stays consistent, right? So what actually happens though is you add more and more customers through the Verodat platform, you're now scaling out the knowledge and awareness that is in front of your model. So your model would have worked very well with one customer. Now you have 100 customers across a variety of variations of implementation, but the same data model. The awareness of your AI model now is improving all the time. Its ability to perform is going to improve. So you create what we call the leader advantage here, first mover advantage. So if you're solving for specific problems in narrow verticals, you can scale that up. And once you're starting to get access to those customers, one customer to 100 customers, you're getting better all the time as a model provider. So we think that's super exciting. I think we do bring a customer a journey. We don't land them there because we're not in the complexity game. We're in the easy to use, save you time game. But we are looking to build out that builder community. We do ourselves do some of this stuff just because it's fun actually to build stuff on that edge. But I think it's a great opportunity there for builders to get their product to customers effectively. And I think we're a great handshake for that. So I think that's a big opportunity for us.
Beautiful. And I'm pretty sure you'll be following some of these data sharing and data privacy practices, just that you will not be overstepping on any of these things. I'm pretty sure.
I didn't touch on it, Raghu, but we're based in Dublin, in Ireland. We follow all the EU regulation. We're in our approach, there is full provenance on everything that you're doing. We're fully certified across the board. I just take that as a given. Like there is no room for maneuver in that space. And what we do in this context ensures that you can provide explainability, you can provide provenance on everything that you're doing. And that's what a data supply chain gives you. Think about a medical device company. They have to go back and trace where everything came from, because if there inherently ends up being an issue downstream, they need to understand the root cause of that. We're in the same space. We operate the same level of detail. And that's pretty much what Verodat has captured to make sure that we don't all have to invent the wheel to do that. That's what Verodat does.
That gets me to that interesting question, another interesting question about measuring the effectiveness of these services, the tools that you provide in this process, right? Like, is there a criteria of how do you evaluate the effectiveness of these services that you are providing?
Yeah. So it comes back to, I suppose I've leaned on it because it's part of our culture, but saving you time and easy to use. So when we establish the information layer, this AI-ready data layer, we measure how often it's consumed. So we measure how many instructions have been run against it to be able to extract an understanding. We measure how many prompts were executed against that in that context. So in both those instances, we can measure how effective it has been in being used to give you an understanding. So that's on your business edge. And on your technical edge, we track and manage the number of rules that are being run against your data set, how much data you actually processing, how fast are you bringing in the data, do you have bottlenecks around your process? So if I have a single source of data that I'm looking for, but I might have 100 vendors that I'm pulling that data from, who are my laggards in that? Who are creating the friction? So that you can target that friction point to make sure it's resolved as it comes in. So we measure everything is probably the answer, but in summary, it's about understanding, which is how much is that data that we've now created being used? And then in the data supply context, it's making sure that we have full visibility on the quality standards we're building towards, number of data sets do we have, and the challenges that might exist in our supply chain, so that we can just go after them in a really tactical way and fix them, so that they don't become this unknown as to why things don't work.
Beautiful, beautiful. So now I come to the most interesting or the important question of our podcast. I term it as the $1 million or the $1 billion question. I know there is a lot of competition out there, and there are different tools and products coming out there. I know you're venturing into this space, but you're a leader, or at least you're pioneering in this space of being the data supply chain leader. How do you differentiate yourself from the competition, or any key unique things that you could like to bring out?
I think we remove complexity, both in the conversation that we have with the market to explain what we do. It's not subjective to you as a company. It's very clear how we prescribe you should attack this problem statement. And the way we do it is very flexible. We can address your business problem. We give people a clear way to think about it. And as a result, they then feel very safe and secure in how we're executing. And when you're dealing with the data space, I think that's a standout for us, because often when you look across that ecosystem of players, it is full of jargon, it is full of complexity, and it's full of mystery. And that's not where we want to compete. And then it goes back to the early story all the time. And we challenge ourselves, our customers challenge us, we don't get it right all the time. But the way we will win is our constant focus on making sure that this is a great tech, matching what AI can do, but a great tech and being easy to use. And there's tons of opportunity now to make it even easier, actually, but it's easy to use, but fundamentally that's saving people time. And if you can take the complexity out of how you're doing that to people, then I think we have a high acceptance rate. So when we have that conversation and explain what we're doing, it feels very linear to people. So I find once we get to have that conversation with a customer, the opportunity propels itself forward because it just feels like an obvious pathway.
Beautiful, beautiful. Amazing. I think amazing conversation. I learned a lot in this conversation. I know I try to keep these conversations under the 1 hour limit. So we're coming to the end of the podcast. Any closing remarks or key takeaways that you would like to provide to the audience, or maybe some more information about how they can learn more about Verodat?
Yeah, I'll cover that in two pieces, because I think there's an important part to this story here, that AI is an incredible opportunity to do two things. It's to reduce technology's complexity in our lives. Technology's got too complex in our lives, and it's creating a lot of stress for people, actually. And I think there's a big opportunity in adopting AI in the right way to reduce that complexity. I think that's a worthy thing to do, because that will actually help people enormously. And when it does that, it's going to help people understand better the facts, understand exactly what's happening, and remove a lot of I suppose, confusion that's existed in the last era around tech, around what's true and what's not, and all that kind of stuff. Like Verodata is called true data. It's a short play on that. And I'm very focused personally on making sure that the quality of decisions that we can make as an organization, as a community, as a nation here in Ireland, as across the globe in general, are at the highest level we can possibly make. And I think data plays a brilliant role in that. So if we can solve that and make a big difference, right? As for our story at Verodat, I think to engage with us should be easy, and should save you time, right? We're not going to waste your time. We'll be very straightforward. If you visit verodat.com, there's a lot of content up there, and we're constantly adding to that. And follow us on LinkedIn, where we're sharing a lot of our philosophy and a lot of our proof cases around what we're doing. So we're very interesting. When I was in San Francisco, the piece that I noticed was there's a lack of use cases and proof of this really working in a practical way for businesses. We're going to be pumping out use cases and proof. So come and join us in that story so you see actually what we can do. And I much prefer making those conversations, which is, here's the cake I made, not the imaginary cake I'm going to make for somebody else, right? So visit verodat.com, follow us online, reach out to me on LinkedIn. More than happy to have a conversation. And yeah, that's the best way to get to understand what we're doing. And just a shout out to that builder community. Obviously, San Francisco, to some amazing guys I met out there when I was out. Reach out to us. We're creating more and more tools to make it easier for you guys to get your product to market. And we'd love to chat to you.
Beautiful. Amazing. Nice having this conversation with you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Raghu. Have a great day.
So as we wrap up this enlightening episode on the data supply chain in the context of AI, we would like to first extend our heartfelt thanks to Thomas Russell, the CEO of Verodat. Thomas, your insights into how the right data used in the right way and context can revolutionize AI applications, which have been truly invaluable. We appreciate you taking the time to share your expertise with our audience. And finally, we also want to thank you, our listeners, for tuning in. Your engagement and curiosity drives us to bring forward such innovative and informative discussions. Please continue to share your interesting questions and feedback. They are very important to us and they are incredibly make us more successful along with you. As always, I'll be tagging Mr. Thomas on the LinkedIn post. So if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to him directly. Alternatively, you can reach out to me, Raghu Banda, on LinkedIn, and I can put you in touch with Thomas. You can also reach out to me on my Twitter, X, or Threads handle, RK You can also go into our website, XTrawAI.com, XTrawAI.com, and find humongous amount of other interesting episodes. Don't forget to stay tuned and subscribe to XTrawAI on your favorite podcast platform for more exciting episodes. Until next time, keep exploring the fascinating world of AI with us. Thank you and have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you're dialing in from or tuning in from. Happy predicting the future with AI technologies. This is your host, Raghu Banda, signing off. Thank you and bye-bye now.